Did you know that Peter Griffin once spent over 20 minutes trying to remember if he locked his car, only to realize he doesn't actually own a car? Or that there's an episode where he becomes convinced his shadow is following him around? Welcome to the world of Family Guy, where the most bizarre situations somehow become comedy gold. I'm about to share some of the most mind-bending, sleep-inducing facts about this animated chaos that might just surprise you. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has died more times than any other main character on Family Guy? We're talking about legitimate deaths here, not just close calls or fake-outs. Throughout the series, Peter's been killed by everything from falling pianos to alien invasions. Yet somehow, he always manages to come back in the next scene, like nothing happened. The writers have never officially explained this phenomenon, leading to fan theories that range from Peter being immortal to the entire show taking place in some sort of cartoon purgatory. Here's another weird one that might help you drift off to sleep. Peter's weight has been officially listed as anywhere between 270 pounds to over 400 pounds, depending on which episode guide you're reading. But here's the kicker. In one episode, they actually show Peter stepping on a scale that reads -5 pounds. The joke was that he was so full of hot air that he defied the laws of physics. This kind of absurd humor is exactly what makes Family Guy so uniquely ridiculous. Speaking of Peter's physical characteristics, his age is another mystery that changes depending on who's writing the episode. He's been anywhere from 39 to 45 years old throughout the series, but in one memorable episode, they reveal that Peter doesn't actually know his own birthday. He's been celebrating it on the wrong day for years because he misread his birth certificate. When Lois finally corrects him, Peter insists on having a do-over birthday party, complete with all the presents he should have received on his actual birthday for the past decade. Now, here's something that might surprise you about the show's production. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally supposed to be recurring segments. The first fight scene was meant to be a one-off joke, but it tested so well with audiences that the writers decided to bring it back. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes and involve massive property damage across multiple city blocks, have become some of the most expensive animated sequences to produce on television. Each chicken fight costs more to animate than entire episodes of some other shows. Let me tell you about Peter's job situation, which is honestly more confusing than quantum physics. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, his own fishing boat business, and even briefly as a bodyguard for a pop star. But here's the thing that'll keep you puzzling as you fall asleep. Sometimes within the same season, the show will contradict itself about where Peter works. In one episode, he'll be complaining about his boss at the brewery, and in the very next episode, he's somehow back at the toy factory with no explanation whatsoever. The Griffin family house itself is another source of endless continuity errors that hardcore fans love to debate. The layout of the house changes constantly throughout the series. Sometimes there are 4 bedrooms upstairs, sometimes 3. The basement has appeared on both the left and right sides of the house in different episodes. Most bizarrely, there was one episode where they showed a second staircase that had never existed before and has never been seen since. It's like the house exists in its own dimension, where architecture is more of a suggestion than a rule. Here's a fact that might make you chuckle as you're trying to fall asleep. Peter Griffin holds the record for the most words spoken per minute in any animated television series. During his fastest rapid-fire dialogue sequence, he spoke over 400 words in 60 seconds. The voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, had to practice that particular monologue for weeks to get it right. And even then, they had to record it in multiple takes and edit them together digitally. The show's relationship with censorship has always been interesting. But did you know that there are entire episodes that have been completely banned from certain countries? Not just edited or censored, but completely prohibited from airing. These episodes aren't necessarily the ones you'd expect either. Sometimes it's because of obscure cultural references that were considered offensive, or because of background details that viewers in certain regions found problematic. There's apparently a whole vault of Family Guy content that most of the world will never see. Peter's relationship with food deserves its own documentary series. Throughout the show, he's eaten everything from expired milk that was older than Meg to a sandwich so large it required a forklift to deliver. But the most impressive feat was when he ate an entire Thanksgiving dinner, including the table it was served on, in under 3 minutes. This wasn't even treated as particularly unusual by his family, who just went ahead and ordered pizza instead. The voice acting for Peter involves more physical comedy than you might expect. Seth MacFarlane actually acts out many of Peter's movements while recording his lines, which is why the character's gestures often seem so natural and expressive. During particularly energetic scenes, MacFarlane has been known to sweat through multiple shirts in a single recording session. He's also injured himself several times while getting too into character, including once throwing out his back during a particularly enthusiastic laugh sequence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Many of Peter's most memorable one-liners were actually improvised during recording sessions. The writers would provide the basic structure of a scene, but they'd leave room for MacFarlane to add his own comedic touches. Some of these improvised moments became so popular with fans that they were later incorporated into the show's official mythology. The Griffin family car has been destroyed and mysteriously repaired more times than any other vehicle in television history. We're talking about complete destruction here. Blown up, crushed by giant robots, eaten by sea monsters, you name it. Yet somehow, it always appears good as new in the next scene. The car itself is supposed to be a mid-'80s sedan, but its exact make and model changes from episode to episode. Sometimes it's a Honda, sometimes it's a Ford, and occasionally it's a completely fictional brand that doesn't exist in real life. Peter's medical history reads like something out of a medical textbook written by someone who's never been to medical school. He's survived diseases that don't exist, undergone surgeries that are physically impossible, and been treated by doctors who clearly got their degrees from the back of a cereal box. In one episode, he's diagnosed with a condition where his bones are apparently made of rubber, which somehow makes him both incredibly flexible and completely indestructible. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the Simpson family has remained the same age for decades, the Griffins seem to exist in a temporal bubble where sometimes years pass and sometimes they don't. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real time. But there have been episodes where characters reference events from their past that would require them to have aged significantly. Here's a production detail that might interest you as you're winding down for the night. The animators have developed an entire catalog of Peter's facial expressions that numbers in the thousands. Each expression is carefully categorized by emotion, intensity, and context. There's apparently an expression called Peter confused by technology that gets used at least once per episode, and another one called Peter realizing he's made a terrible mistake. That's practically the show's trademark look. The Griffin family's financial situation is another source of endless mystery. Despite Peter's various job situations and questionable work ethic, the family somehow maintains a middle-class lifestyle in a decent neighborhood. They've been shown to be both desperately broke and surprisingly wealthy, sometimes within the same episode significantly over the years. But Peter's character design has remained remarkably consistent. The animators have stated that his round shape and simple features make him one of the easier characters to draw, which is ironic considering how complex his personality and animation. Here's something that might make you smile as you're drifting off. Peter Griffin has inadvertently solved more crimes than most actual detectives on television, not through any kind of investigative skill, mind you, but through sheer dumb luck and his tendency to stumble into situations where criminals just happen to confess everything to him. He's uncovered everything from art theft rings to international espionage operations, usually while just trying to buy a sandwich or find a bathroom. The character's impact on popular culture extends far beyond the show itself. Peter's laugh has been sampled in music tracks. His catchphrases have entered everyday vocabulary, and his image has appeared on everything from t-shirts to coffee mugs. There's even been academic papers written about his role as a representation of American masculinity in the 21st century, which is probably something Peter himself would find hilariously pretentious. Peter's driving skills, or complete lack thereof, deserve special mention. He's been responsible for more animated car accidents than any other cartoon character in history. The Department of Motor Vehicles in the show's universe has apparently given up on revoking his license, instead just accepting that Peter Griffin behind the wheel is simply a force of nature that must be endured. The show's writers have admitted that they sometimes write episodes specifically around Peter's most ridiculous character traits. There are entire plot lines that exist solely because someone in the writer's room wondered what would happen if Peter tried to do something completely ordinary, like go grocery shopping or attend a parent-teacher conference, and inevitably turned it into a disaster of epic proportions. As we wrap up this collection of Family Guy facts, here's one final detail that perfectly captures the show's absurdist spirit. In the show's internal logic, Peter Griffin is simultaneously the most incompetent person alive and somehow capable of surviving situations that would destroy normal human beings. He's a character who can't figure out how to use a can opener but can somehow survive being hit by a train. He's confused by basic mathematics but has accidentally invented several revolutionary technologies while trying to fix his toaster. These contradictions aren't bugs in the show's writing, they're features. Family Guy exists in a universe where logic is optional and consistency is overrated. Peter Griffin embodies this philosophy perfectly, being both completely relatable and utterly impossible at the same time. Whether that helps you fall asleep or keeps you awake wondering about the nature of animated reality is entirely up to you. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, even the most ridiculous facts somehow make perfect sense, which might be the most ridiculous fact of all. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, and somehow clawed its way back from television death each time? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre world behind one of the most controversial animated shows ever created. And trust me, the stories I'm about to share will blow your mind. From secret celebrity cameos that never made it to air, to the shocking real-life inspiration behind Stewie's character, we're uncovering Family Guy secrets that even die-hard fans have never heard before. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how close we came to never having Family Guy at all. Back in 1999, when Seth MacFarlane pitched his idea to Fox executives, he was so broke he was literally sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. The pilot episode cost over $2 million to produce, making it one of the most expensive animated pilots in television history at that time. And here's the kicker. Fox almost passed on it completely because they thought it was too similar to The Simpsons. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has a background that's absolutely fascinating and explains so much about the show's unique humor. He actually started working in animation when he was just 18 years old, creating a thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design that would later become the blueprint for Family Guy. That student film, which you can still find online today, featured early versions of Peter, Lois, and their dog Brian, though they looked quite different from what we know now. What most people don't realize is that MacFarlane does the voices for 4 main characters on the show. He's not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. The interesting part is how he developed each voice. Peter's voice was inspired by a security guard MacFarlane knew who had a thick Rhode Island accent. Brian's voice is essentially MacFarlane's natural speaking voice, while Stewie was originally supposed to sound like Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady, though it evolved into something completely different over time. Speaking of Stewie, here's something that might surprise you. The character was initially written as a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that Stewie's sexuality was deliberately kept ambiguous for years, and the writers would often joke about it in the writer's room. The character's development into a more complex, often effeminate, genius baby happened gradually over several seasons, and it wasn't planned from the beginning. The show's relationship with censorship has been absolutely wild from day one. There's an entire archive of Family Guy scenes that were deemed too controversial for broadcast television. One episode had a joke about the September 11th attacks that was removed before airing, and another had a sequence involving Mickey Mouse that Disney's lawyers shut down faster than you could say copyright infringement. The writers have always pushed boundaries, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. Here's where things get really interesting. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox executives thought that was the end of it. But something unprecedented happened in television history. The show found a massive second life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming block. The DVD sales were so strong that they actually outsold many primetime dramas that were still on the air. This success story became a case study in how a show could resurrect itself through alternative distribution methods. The fan campaign to bring the show back was unlike anything television had seen before. This was before social media as we know it today, so fans organized through message boards, early blogs, and even physical petitions. They sent thousands of letters to Fox executives, and some fans even sent baby bottles and diapers as a reference to Stewie. The campaign worked, and in 2005, Family Guy returned for a 4th season, making it one of the first canceled shows to be revived due to fan demand and DVD sales. But then lightning struck twice, and the show was canceled again in 2002 and brought back again in 2005. making it the first show in television history to be canceled and revived twice. This second cancellation and revival story is even more dramatic than the first. The show's ratings had dipped during its third season, and Fox executives felt it had run its course. However, the DVD sales for the first 3 seasons were so astronomical that they couldn't ignore the numbers. The voice acting process for Family Guy is absolutely fascinating and different from most animated shows. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, the main Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates a more natural flow of dialogue and allows for improvisation that you can sometimes hear in the final episodes. Seth MacFarlane has said that some of the funniest moments in the show came from spontaneous interactions during these group recording sessions. One of the most mind-blowing facts about the show involves the famous chicken fight scenes between Peter Griffin and Ernie the giant chicken. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes, actually cost more to animate than entire episodes of some other animated shows. The animators have to create detailed fight choreography, multiple background locations, and complex character movements. MacFarlane has joked that these scenes are his way of burning through the show's animation budget in the most entertaining way possible. The show's cutaway gags, which are basically mini-sketches that interrupt the main storyline, weren't originally part of the show's format. They were added during the second season as a way to incorporate more jokes and references that didn't fit naturally into the main plot. These cutaways became so popular that they essentially became the show's signature style, influencing countless other animated comedies that followed. Family Guy has had some absolutely incredible celebrity guest stars over the years, but many people don't know about the ones who almost appeared but didn't. Michael Jackson was reportedly interested in doing a voice on the show in the early 2000s, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Similarly, several A-list actors have recorded guest appearances that were later cut from episodes due to various reasons, from scheduling conflicts to content concerns. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy references and memes have become part of everyday internet language. Phrases like, "that really grinds my gears," and "giggity" have entered the cultural lexicon. The show has been referenced in academic papers about humor, animation, and cultural commentary. Some universities have actually used Family Guy episodes as case studies in media studies courses. Here's something that might keep you up thinking about it. The show has predicted several real-world events with uncanny accuracy. There's an episode from 2005 that jokes about Kevin Spacey in a way that seems eerily prescient given later revelations about the actor. Another episode made jokes about certain political figures that seemed outlandish at the time but became remarkably relevant years later. Whether these are coincidences or the writers having incredible insight into human nature is up for debate. The international versions of Family Guy are absolutely wild and worth exploring if you're curious about cultural adaptation. The show has been dubbed into dozens of languages, and each version has had to navigate different cultural sensitivities and humor styles. The German version, for example, had to completely rewrite many jokes because direct translations didn't make sense or weren't funny in that cultural context. Some countries have banned certain episodes entirely while embracing others. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has been fascinating to watch evolve over the years. Initially, there was definitely some tension, with Simpsons creator Matt Groening making pointed comments about Family Guy being derivative. However, this led to one of the most brilliant crossover episodes in animated television history, where the two families actually met and interacted. The production of this crossover episode required unprecedented cooperation between two different animation studios and networks. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates differently from most television shows. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, with the understanding that most of these will never make it to air. This competitive atmosphere has created some of the show's most memorable moments, but it's also led to some jokes that had to be completely rewritten or abandoned during the production process. The show's approach to social and political commentary has evolved significantly over its run. Early episodes were primarily focused on absurd humor and pop culture references, but later seasons began incorporating more direct political satire and social commentary. This evolution has been both praised and criticized, with some fans preferring the original format and others appreciating the show's willingness to tackle serious topics through humor. MacFarlane's decision to step back from day-to-day involvement in the show after several seasons was a turning point that many fans noticed. His reduced involvement allowed other writers and producers to put their stamp on the show, leading to subtle but noticeable changes in humor, style, and character development. This transition period created some of the most experimental episodes in the show's history. The merchandising empire that Family Guy has built is absolutely staggering. From action figures to clothing lines, from video games to board games, the show has spawned an entire industry of products. Some of the most interesting merchandise includes items that reference the show's most obscure jokes, suggesting that the creators understand their audience's deep knowledge of the series. As we wind down our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's worth reflecting on how this show that almost never existed became such a cultural phenomenon. From sleeping on couches to creating a multi-million-dollar franchise, from cancellation to resurrection, from controversy to cultural impact, Family Guy represents something unique in entertainment history. The show continues to evolve and surprise audiences, and who knows what wild facts we'll be sharing about it in another 20 years. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably working on another joke that will either make you laugh until you cry or shake your head in disbelief. Possibly both at the same time. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across something so unexpectedly fascinating that you forget you were even tired? Well, tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic, bizarre, and surprisingly complex world of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. And trust me, by the time we're done unraveling his entire story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple cartoon dad is actually one of television's most intricate characters. Most people think they know Peter Griffin. Fat guy, drinks beer, fights a giant chicken, right? Wrong. What if I told you that Peter's backstory involves multiple identities, time travel, alternate dimensions, and a family tree so twisted it makes soap operas look straightforward? What if I told you that this bumbling father figure has actually died and been resurrected more times than most comic book heroes? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me paint you the complete picture of Peter Griffin's existence, from his mysterious birth to his countless near-death experiences and everything in between. Because once you see the full scope of his story, Family Guy will never look the same again. Let's start at the very beginning, because Peter's origin story is far more complex than you might imagine. Peter Justin Griffin wasn't always a Griffin. He was born Peter McFinnigan in Mexico, though the circumstances of his birth are shrouded in mystery and contradiction. His biological father, Francis Griffin, was an ultra-religious Irish Catholic man whose stern demeanor would later shape much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. But here's where things get interesting. Peter spent his early childhood believing he was Irish, embracing this identity with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can muster. However, his world was turned upside down when he discovered through a series of revelations that his heritage was far more complicated than he ever imagined. The man he thought was his father figure, Francis, represented everything Peter would grow to rebel against: rigid religious doctrine, conservative values, and an inability to express joy or spontaneity. This early trauma of identity confusion would follow Peter throughout his entire life. Think about it. How many episodes revolve around Peter discovering something new about his past or his identity? It's not coincidence. It's the fundamental driving force of his character. He's constantly searching for who he really is, because his foundation was built on uncertainty. Peter's adoption by the Griffin family brought him to Rhode Island, specifically to the fictional town of Quahog. Now, Quahog itself is practically a character in Peter's story. This small New England town serves as both his sanctuary and his prison. It's where he's built his adult life, but it's also where he's trapped in cycles of behavior that prevent him from growing beyond his teenage mentality. The Griffin household on Spooner Street became Peter's universe, and understanding the dynamics of this home is crucial to understanding Peter himself. His relationship with his adoptive family shaped his approach to his own family later in life. The lack of a strong father figure during his formative years explains so much about his parenting style with his own children. Speaking of his children, let's talk about Peter as a father, because this is where his story becomes truly complex. Meg, Chris, and Stewie Griffin represent three different aspects of Peter's own personality reflected back at him. Meg embodies his insecurities and need for acceptance, which is why he treats her so harshly. He's rejecting the parts of himself he dislikes most. Chris represents his simple, well-meaning nature, which is why Peter can sometimes be genuinely caring toward him. And Stewie? Stewie represents Peter's intelligence and ambition, the parts of himself he never developed or explored. The way Peter interacts with each child tells us more about his internal psychology than any therapy session could. When he's cruel to Meg, he's being cruel to his own perceived inadequacies. When he's protective of Chris, he's protecting his own innocence. And when he's bewildered by Stewie, he's confronting the intellectual potential he never realized. Then there's Lois, and oh boy, is their relationship a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as sitcom comedy. Lois Griffin comes from wealth and privilege, everything Peter never had growing up. Their marriage represents Peter's ultimate conquest. He managed to win over someone completely out of his league, but it also represents his greatest fear, that he's not worthy of love or success. Peter's constant need to prove himself worthy of Lois drives many of his most outrageous schemes and adventures. Every time he starts a business, learns a new skill, or attempts to become famous, he's really trying to prove that Lois was right to choose him. The fact that she stays with him despite his countless failures isn't just comedy gold, it's the foundation of Peter's entire worldview. Now let's talk about Peter's professional life, because his career history reads like a resume from an alternate dimension. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, tried his hand at entertainment, and held countless other jobs. Each career change represents Peter's ongoing search for his true calling, his desperate attempt to find something that gives his life meaning beyond just being a husband and father. The Pawtucket Patriot Brewery isn't just where Peter works, it's where he found his tribe. His friendship with Glenn Quagmire, Cleveland Brown, and Joe Swanson represents the family he chose for himself. These relationships are arguably the most stable and consistent in his entire life. While his family relationships are complicated by obligation and expectation, his friendships exist purely because he enjoys these people's company. But here's what's fascinating about Peter's friend group: they're all fundamentally broken in their own ways, just like him. Quagmire's hypersexuality, Cleveland's passive nature, and Joe's physical limitations all serve as mirrors for different aspects of Peter's own struggles with masculinity, ambition, and physical insecurity. The infamous chicken fights with Ernie the Giant Chicken deserve special attention because they represent something deeper than just absurd comedy. These epic battles symbolize Peter's relationship with obstacles in general. Instead of finding reasonable solutions to problems, Peter's instinct is to meet challenges head-on with disproportionate force and stubbornness. The chicken fights are metaphors for how Peter approaches every conflict in his life, with excessive energy, poor planning, and a refusal to back down even when he's clearly outmatched. Peter's death and resurrection experiences are another crucial element of his story that often gets overlooked. He's technically died multiple times throughout the series, only to return as if nothing happened. These deaths aren't just reset buttons for the show. They represent Peter's resilience and his refusal to let anything, including mortality, keep him down. Each resurrection reinforces his belief that he's somehow special, somehow protected, which feeds into his often reckless behavior. The alternate timeline and dimension episodes reveal even more about Peter's character. When we see versions of Peter from different realities, we're seeing the paths his life could have taken under different circumstances. Some versions are more successful, others are more tragic, but they're all recognizably Peter at their core. This suggests that regardless of circumstances, certain aspects of his personality are fundamental and unchangeable. Peter's relationship with authority figures throughout the series follows a consistent pattern that traces back to his complicated relationship with his biological father, Francis. Whether he's dealing with his boss, Mr. Weed, later Angela, or any government official, Peter's default response is rebellion. He can't help but challenge authority, not because he has a well-reasoned philosophical objection to hierarchy, but because authority reminds him of the rigid control he experienced in his early religious upbringing. His various business ventures and get-rich-quick schemes reveal Peter's deep-seated belief that success should come easily. This isn't just laziness. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works, likely stemming from his upbringing where religious doctrine promised rewards for faith rather than effort. Peter applies this same magical thinking to business, relationships, and personal growth. The running gags and catchphrases that define Peter aren't just comedy elements, they're coping mechanisms. His nigh-he-he-he laugh, his random pop culture references, and his tendency to break into song are all ways he deflects serious, emotional moments. Peter uses humor as a shield against having to confront the deeper issues in his life. Peter's body image and relationship with food tell another important part of his story. His weight isn't just a visual gag. It represents his relationship with comfort and self-control. Food is Peter's primary source of comfort, his go-to solution for stress, boredom, and emotional pain. His eating habits are directly tied to his emotional state, which is why dramatic moments in his life often involve food in some way. The flashback episodes that show Peter at different ages reveal how his core personality traits were established early and have remained remarkably consistent. Young Peter displays the same impulsiveness, the same need for attention, and the same difficulty with authority that define adult Peter. This consistency suggests that Peter's behavior isn't really about his circumstances. It's about deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and responding to the world. Peter's occasional moments of genuine wisdom and insight are perhaps the most revealing aspects of his character. When he drops his usual antics and speaks from the heart, we see glimpses of the person he could be if he wasn't so afraid of being vulnerable. These moments are rare, but they show that Peter's intelligence and emotional capacity are much greater than his usual behavior suggests. His relationship with popular culture and media consumption reflects modern society's relationship with information and entertainment. Peter absorbs pop culture references without really understanding their context or meaning, much like how many people today consume information. He's a character designed for the internet age, even though he was created before social media existed. The international episodes where Peter travels to different countries reveal his American-centric worldview, while also showing his capacity to adapt when forced out of his comfort zone. These adventures don't fundamentally change him, but they do show that he's capable of growth when his usual coping mechanisms aren't available. Peter's various nemesis throughout the series, from the chicken to his own father to random authority figures, all represent different aspects of his internal struggles. He's not really fighting these external enemies. He's fighting parts of himself that he can't accept or integrate. As we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Griffin's complete story, it's important to recognize that his character represents something universal about the human experience. We all struggle with identity. We all rebel against aspects of our upbringing. We all fear that we're not worthy of the love we've received, and we all use various coping mechanisms to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. Peter Griffin isn't just a cartoon character. He's a mirror reflecting our own struggles with adulthood, responsibility, and self-acceptance. His story is ultimately about someone trying to figure out how to be a good person despite being fundamentally unprepared for adult life. And in that struggle, we see ourselves. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching random comedy sketches. You're witnessing the ongoing saga of a man wrestling with the same questions we all face. Who am I really? Am I good enough? And how do I build a meaningful life when I feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of existence? Sweet dreams. And remember, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, just like Peter Griffin. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this: a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path. Rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with 0 social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was 2 damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love,
but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become Even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. Welcome back, night owls and daydreamers. Tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Quahog with some fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to sleep with a smile. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the Griffin family madness, these relaxing tidbits about one of animation's most controversial shows will guide you gently into dreamland. Let's start our journey back to 1999, when Family Guy first graced television screens. The show almost never happened at all. Creator Seth MacFarlane was working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera when he created two animated shorts called The Life of Larry and Larry and Steve. These featured a man and his talking dog, which would eventually evolve into Peter and Brian Griffin. Fox executives were so impressed with MacFarlane's work that they gave him an unprecedented deal for someone so young, making him the youngest person ever to create a primetime series for the network at just 24 years old. The original pilot episode had a much smaller budget than later episodes, which is why the animation looks noticeably different. The Griffin house interior was actually based on the house from another famous animated family, but with some creative liberties taken. MacFarlane has mentioned that he wanted the show to feel lived in and realistic, despite all the absurd situations the family would find themselves in. Speaking of the Griffin family, each character was carefully designed to represent different aspects of the American family dynamic. Peter Griffin, the bumbling patriarch, was inspired by MacFarlane's own father and various blue-collar workers he'd observed growing up in Connecticut. His distinctive laugh wasn't originally planned. It just happened naturally during recording sessions, and the creators decided to keep it because it felt so authentic to the character. Lois Griffin underwent several design changes before settling on her final appearance. Originally, she was going to have a completely different personality, more stern and less patient with her family's antics. The writers quickly realized that having someone slightly more grounded would make the show's more outrageous moments feel more believable. Her background as a wealthy heiress was added later to explain how the family could afford their lifestyle despite Peter's various job changes and general incompetence. The character of Meg started out very differently than how fans know her today. In the early seasons, she was treated more like a regular teenage daughter dealing with typical adolescent problems. The running joke of the entire family treating her terribly wasn't established until later seasons. This shift reflected the show's overall evolution toward more extreme and absurd humor over time. Chris Griffin was originally going to be the smart one in the family, but the writers felt this would create too much overlap with Brian's role as the voice of reason. Instead, they made him dim-witted but good-hearted, which created better comedic opportunities and family dynamics. His voice actor actually had to learn to make his voice crack consistently to maintain the character's adolescent sound as the show progressed through multiple seasons. Stewie Griffin is perhaps the most complex character in terms of development. His evil, genius baby persona was inspired by various movie villains, but his sophisticated vocabulary and adult concerns created an interesting contradiction that the writers loved exploring. The ambiguity around his sexual orientation was intentional from early on, with MacFarlane wanting to create a character that defied easy categorization. The family dog Brian started as a relatively simple character, but evolved into something much more complex. He was meant to be the straight man to the family's chaos, offering occasional wisdom and commentary. His human-like behavior was the central joke, a dog who acted more civilized than his human family members. The character served as MacFarlane's voice in many episodes, expressing his own political views and social commentary through Brian's dialogue and actions. Family Guy's animation style was heavily influenced by classic cartoons, but with modern sensibilities. The character designs were kept relatively simple to allow for faster animation production, but the backgrounds were often incredibly detailed. The color palette was specifically chosen to feel warm and inviting, like a real family home, which contrasted nicely with the show's often chaotic storylines. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't originally planned as a major feature. They started as occasional diversions but became more frequent when the writers realized how much creative freedom they provided. These sequences allowed the show to explore completely unrelated scenarios and parody different time periods, movies, and cultural phenomena without being constrained by the main plot. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how much the voice actors contribute to their characters' development. Many of the show's funniest moments came from improvisation during recording sessions. The actors would often suggest alternative line readings or add physical comedy that would then be animated to match their performance. The show's musical numbers weren't part of the original concept, but became increasingly important as the series progressed. MacFarlane's background in musical theater and his love of classic show tunes influenced many of these sequences. The elaborate production numbers often required months of preparation and coordination between the animation, music, and voice departments. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has been complicated throughout its run. The show has pushed boundaries since its inception, but network standards have evolved over the years. Many episodes have alternate versions with different jokes or sequences depending on when and where they're broadcast. This has created an interesting archive of content that varies significantly across different platforms and time periods. The series has featured an incredible array of celebrity guest stars over the years, many of whom were fans of the show before appearing on it. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others made single appearances that became memorable moments for fans. The show's writers often write specific roles with particular actors in mind, creating unique opportunities for both established and emerging performers. Behind the scenes, Family Guy's production schedule is incredibly demanding. Each episode takes months to complete, from initial script to final animation. The process involves dozens of artists, writers, and technicians working in coordination. Despite this complexity, the show has maintained a remarkably consistent output for over 2 decades. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy references and quotes have become part of everyday conversation for many fans. The show's influence can be seen in countless other animated series that followed, many of which adopted similar humor styles and narrative structures. Family Guy's cancellation and subsequent revival is one of television's most interesting stories. After being canceled twice, the show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on cable networks. This proved that there was still a significant audience for the show's particular brand of humor, leading to its eventual return to primetime television. The evolution of animation technology has dramatically changed how Family Guy is produced. Early seasons required hand-drawn animation cells, while modern episodes are created entirely digitally. This technological shift has allowed for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some fans prefer the slightly rougher aesthetic of the earlier seasons. Family Guy's international success has led to numerous international versions and adaptations. Different countries have created their own versions of the show with local characters and cultural references. These adaptations provide fascinating insights into how humor translates across different cultures and societies. The show's merchandise empire extends into virtually every category imaginable. From clothing and toys to video games and books, Family Guy has become a brand unto itself. This commercial success has helped fund the show's continued production and allowed for increasingly ambitious episodes and special events. Family Guy's writing process involves a large team of contributors working collaboratively. Story ideas can come from anywhere, and the show's writer's room is known for its freewheeling creative atmosphere. Many of the show's most memorable episodes began as simple throwaway comments that evolved into full storylines through group brainstorming sessions. The show's holiday episodes have, quote, become annual traditions for many families. These special episodes often feature elaborate musical numbers and heartwarming moments that contrast with the show's typically irreverent tone. The Christmas episodes in particular have become comfort viewing for many fans during the holiday season. Family Guy's relationship with social media has evolved significantly over the years. The show's official accounts regularly share behind-the-scenes content, and the writers often interact directly with fans online. This direct connection between creators and audience has influenced how episodes are developed and promoted. The series has tackled numerous social and political issues throughout its run, often generating significant discussion and sometimes controversy. These episodes demonstrate the show's willingness to engage with serious topics while maintaining its comedic perspective. The balance between entertainment and commentary has been a defining characteristic of the series. Family Guy's sound design is incredibly detailed, with each episode featuring hundreds of individual sound effects and musical cues. The show's audio team works closely with the animation department to ensure that every visual gag is supported by appropriate sound. This attention to audio detail helps create the show's distinctive atmosphere. The series has spawned several spin-offs and related projects over the years. These additional shows have allowed the creators to explore different aspects of the Family Guy universe and experiment with new storytelling approaches. Some have been more successful than others, but all have contributed to the overall Family Guy mythology. Family Guy's influence on comedy writing can be seen in numerous other television shows and movies. The show's particular style of rapid-fire jokes and pop culture references has become a template that many other creators have adapted and modified for their own projects. The show's live performances and special events have created unique opportunities for fans to experience Family Guy in different contexts. These events often feature the voice actors performing in character and provide insights into the creative process that aren't available through the regular episodes. Family Guy's educational impact, while perhaps unintentional, has been significant. Many viewers have discovered new music, learned historical facts, or been introduced to classic movies through the show's references and parodies. This accidental educational component has made the show valuable beyond pure entertainment. The series has maintained its relevance across multiple generations of viewers. Parents who watched the show when it first aired now watch it with their own children, creating shared cultural experiences that span decades. This intergenerational appeal has helped ensure the show's continued success. Family Guy's production team includes numerous talented artists who have gone on to create their own successful projects. The show has served as a training ground for many animators, writers, and voice actors who have used their experience to launch their own careers in entertainment. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, allowing for creative freedom while occasionally referencing past events. This flexible approach to storytelling has enabled the writers to explore virtually any scenario without being constrained by previous episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its fan community is uniquely interactive. The show's creators regularly acknowledge fan theories and suggestions, sometimes incorporating them into actual episodes. This collaborative relationship between creators and audience has helped maintain the show's popularity over many years. As we drift towards sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents more than just animated comedy. It's a cultural phenomenon that has brought laughter to millions of viewers worldwide. The show's ability to evolve while maintaining its core identity demonstrates the power of creative persistence and the importance of connecting with audiences on multiple levels. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be filled with the gentle chaos of Quahog, where anything is possible and laughter is always just around the corner. The Griffin family will be there waiting when you wake up, ready with new adventures and timeless humor that continues to entertain after all these years.
Picture this. You're lying in bed, phone in hand, ready to drift off to the soothing sound of random Family Guy trivia. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because tonight we're diving deep into the most bizarre, shocking, and downright disturbing moments that have happened to every single character in Quahog. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your favorite dysfunctional cartoon family the same way again. Now, before we start this journey through animated trauma, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the worst day of your life was broadcast on national television for millions to laugh at? Well, that's basically every episode of Family Guy for these poor fictional souls. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the darkest corners of Seth MacFarlane's twisted imagination. Starting alphabetically with Adam West, because why not begin with a mayor who's nuttier than a fruitcake? This eccentric political figure finally found his soulmate when he married Carol, Lois's sister. For a guy who regularly talks to his own hand and thinks cardboard cutouts are real people, finding true love seemed like a miracle. The wedding was beautiful, the honeymoon was passionate, and for once in his bizarre life, Adam West looked genuinely happy. But happiness in Family Guy is like a snowball in hell. It melts faster than you can say cutaway gag. Carol decided that one mayor wasn't enough for her appetite, so she started having an affair with another man. When Adam discovered this betrayal, instead of walking away with his dignity intact, he challenged the other guy to a duel. Because nothing says rational response like pistols at dawn, right? The worst part wasn't just the cheating. It was watching this lonely, eccentric man desperately fight for someone who clearly didn't deserve his devotion. Carol promised it would never happen again, but we all knew that was complete garbage. Adam deserved so much better than a woman who treated his heart like a revolving door. Moving on to Angela, Peter's former boss at the toy company. Unlike most characters who simply disappear without explanation, Angela got a proper send-off that hit viewers right in the feels. When voice actress Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, the show made the touching decision to address it directly in the series. According to Peter's explanation, Angela died doing what she loved, which was apparently swimming less than 20 minutes after eating. Now, we all know that's an old wives' tale about getting cramps. But in the Family Guy universe, it was enough to send this strong, independent businesswoman to her watery grave. It's both absurd and oddly respectful. which perfectly captures the show's ability to blend humor with genuine emotion. Barbara Pewterschmidt, or Babs as she's known to friends, has endured decades of her husband Carter's wandering eye. This woman has put up with more infidelity than a reality TV show contestant, and somehow she keeps forgiving him. The breaking point came when Peter caught Carter in bed with yet another woman, and after some classic Griffin family blackmail shenanigans, the secret inevitably came out. Picture the devastation on Babs's face when she realized that everyone knew about her husband's latest affair before she did. The humiliation of being the last to know, the embarrassment of having your private pain become public gossip. It's enough to break anyone's spirit. She kicked his crusty behind out of the house and tried to start fresh, but love makes fools of us all, and she eventually took him back. The irony is that Babs isn't exactly innocent herself. She's had her own affairs over the years, including that memorable encounter with Jackie Gleason. But there's something particularly cruel about Carter's public humiliation of his wife that makes this betrayal sting more than the others. Bonnie Swanson represents the dark side of suburban marriage. When she's not cheating on her paralyzed husband, she's literally trying to murder him with ground glass in his food, or buying rickety houses hoping they'll collapse on him. But karma has a way of coming full circle, and Bonnie got a taste of her own medicine in the most humiliating way possible. During their daughter's birthday party, with friends and family gathered around, Bonnie overheard Joe having an affair with a colleague through the baby monitor. Imagine the mortification of discovering your spouse's betrayal while surrounded by people who are supposed to be celebrating your family. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the method of discovery was like something out of a soap opera nightmare. The fact that this happened during what should have been a joyous occasion for their child makes it even more devastating. Bonnie may be a serial cheater herself, but nobody deserves to have their private pain exposed in such a public and humiliating way. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the philosophical dog with more emotional baggage than a therapy convention. Poor Brian has endured countless injuries over the years, from losing his teeth in a fight with Peter to getting his face smashed by a fire hydrant. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was his temporary death in season 12. Getting hit by that car and actually dying, even if it was only for 2 episodes, represents the ultimate trauma for any character. Death is supposed to be permanent, final, the end of all stories. For Brian to experience that ultimate fear and then somehow return to life, the psychological impact must have been enormous. Think about it from his perspective. One moment he's crossing the street, the next he's presumably facing whatever comes after life. Then suddenly he's back, but with the knowledge that death is real, permanent, and can happen at any moment. That kind of existential trauma would mess with anyone's head, even a talking dog who writes pretentious novels. Bruce's story is one of love, acceptance, and heartbreaking loss. After years of hiding his true self, he finally came out, married his longtime partner Jeffrey, and even had a baby through surrogacy. For the first time in his life, Bruce was living authentically, openly, and happily. He had everything he'd ever wanted: a husband, a child, and the freedom to be himself without shame or fear. But Family Guy has never been kind to happiness, and during what should have been a perfect vacation in Bermuda, tragedy struck in the most brutal way imaginable. Jeffrey's hat fell into the water, and being the loving husband he was, he jumped in to retrieve it. That simple act of devotion cost him his life when a shark attacked and killed him in front of Bruce's horrified eyes. The imagery of watching Jeffrey get torn apart by a predator, followed by the soul-crushing sight of 2 coffins being loaded onto the plane, represents a level of trauma that goes beyond physical pain. Bruce had to watch his dreams of a perfect life literally get devoured before his eyes. Carter Pewterschmidt is arguably one of the most evil characters on the show. This billionaire has hidden cancer cures for profit, destroyed countless lives for money, and shown no remorse for any of his actions. But karma caught up with him in the most ironic way possible when Lois accidentally shot him in the head. The bullet caused severe brain damage that completely changed Carter's personality. Suddenly, this cruel capitalist became kind, generous, and caring. He wanted to give away all his money to charity and live a life of compassion instead of greed. For the first time ever, Carter was actually happy and at peace with himself. But Barbara couldn't stand the thought of losing their fortune, so she shot him in the head again, reversing the brain damage and bringing back the cruel version of her husband. The tragedy isn't just that Carter got shot twice by his own family. It's that he briefly experienced what it felt like to be a good person, only to have that stolen away from him. Chris Griffin's worst moment doesn't involve getting turned into sausage or any of the other bizarre things that happen to him regularly. No. His darkest hour came when the Griffin house caught fire and Herbert the creepy neighbor rushed in to supposedly save him. For a brief moment, it looked like Herbert might actually be a hero, but instead of carrying Chris to safety, he took him straight back to his own house. The most disturbing part wasn't even Herbert's actions. It was his family's complete lack of concern. When they discovered what happened, their reaction was basically that Herbert had earned the right to kidnap Chris. The casual acceptance of what was clearly an inappropriate situation shows just how little Chris's family actually cares about his well-being. Cleveland Brown has endured countless humiliations over the years, from his bathtub crashing through his house repeatedly to various other physical mishaps. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was being betrayed by one of his closest friends in the most heinous way imaginable. Joe Swanson tricked Cleveland into going to what he thought was a vacation in Florida, but was actually a retirement home run by seniors who harvest organs from unsuspecting victims. Joe wanted Peter's legs for himself, but when that plan fell through, he sent Cleveland as a substitute without warning him about the danger. Imagine discovering that someone you trusted with your life had essentially sold you out to organ harvesters. Cleveland literally lost his legs because Joe was too selfish to give up his twisted scheme. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound because it came from someone he considered family. The mystery of Cleveland Jr. represents one of the show's darkest unsolved cases. The original Cleveland Jr. was energetic, slim, and full of life. But suddenly, without explanation, he was replaced by a completely different person who was overweight, slow, and bore no resemblance to the original character. The official explanation is that the original was replaced by a secret agent, but what actually happened to the real Cleveland Jr. remains unknown. The implications are terrifying. Is he dead? Is he being held captive somewhere? Has he been brainwashed? The uncertainty is almost worse than knowing the truth would be. This represents every parent's worst nightmare, having their child disappear and replaced by an imposter while everyone else pretends nothing happened. Cleveland doesn't even seem to notice or care that his son is completely different, which adds another layer of tragedy to the situation. Consuela works harder than anyone else in Quahog, fighting for her fellow maids while cleaning houses for multiple families and even Superman. But her dedication to helping others led her to work for James Woods, a decision she would come to regret in the most horrific way possible. In one of the show's darkest moments, Consuela revealed that Woods had assaulted her nephew, who later took his own life as a result of the trauma. This single line of dialogue carries more weight than entire episodes of physical comedy. It's a reminder that behind the jokes and gags, these characters have real pain and real trauma. The fact that Consuela continued working and fighting for others despite carrying this enormous burden speaks to her incredible strength. But nobody should have to endure such a devastating loss, especially when it could have been prevented. Death himself, the actual Grim Reaper, experienced his own form of mortality when he twisted his ankle while chasing Peter. Suddenly, the being responsible for all death on Earth was sidelined by a simple injury. Without Death able to do his job, chaos erupted as accidents piled up with no consequences. Being forced to hand over his powers to Peter Griffin, of all people, must have been absolutely humiliating for such a powerful entity. Imagine being rendered helpless by something as mundane as a twisted ankle when you're supposed to be one of the most feared forces in the universe. The irony of Death being unable to die from his own injury while watching Peter bungle the most important job in existence must have been torture. Sometimes the worst pain isn't physical. It's watching someone else destroy everything you've worked for. Diane Simmons's downfall began when she discovered she was being replaced by a younger news anchor. After dedicating her life to journalism, the industry she loved was throwing her away like yesterday's newspaper. The rejection and humiliation drove her to madness, leading to a killing spree at James Woods' mansion party. Her plan to frame Tom Tucker and reclaim her career was as desperate as it was violent. But when it all fell apart and she was about to kill Lois, Stewie ended her reign of terror with a single shot. Going from respected journalist to murderous villain to corpse in a matter of hours represents a complete life collapse that few characters have experienced. Dr. Hartman's medical incompetence is legendary, but the one time he actually did his job correctly, it ruined his career. During a routine prostate exam on Peter, he performed the procedure exactly as he was supposed to, but Peter's ignorance and embarrassment led to false assault charges that cost Hartman his medical license. The injustice of losing his livelihood for doing his job properly must have been devastating for someone who, despite his flaws, genuinely wants to help people. Being dragged through court and having his reputation destroyed over a misunderstanding shows how quickly a life can be ruined by ignorance and fear. When Peter later needed the same procedure and had to crawl back to the doctor he destroyed, the humiliation was complete. Hartman eventually got his license back, but the damage to his reputation and the trauma of the legal battle left permanent scars. Ernie the giant chicken has survived countless brutal fights with Peter over the years, but his battle with Meg might have been his last. When Meg moved in with her boyfriend's family and Ernie insulted Peter, she stood up for her father in the most violent way possible. Despite all the abuse Peter has heaped on her over the years, Meg's loyalty to her family ran deep enough that she couldn't stand hearing someone else trash-talk him. Her brutal decapitation of Ernie was both shocking and oddly touching, showing that family bonds can survive even the worst treatment. The sight of Ernie's headless body running around in front of his horrified family was disturbing, even by Family Guy standards. The fact that we didn't get the usual close-up of his eyes suggests this might have been his final defeat, making Meg the one person who could do what Peter never could. The evil monkey's story is actually quite sad when you think about it. For years he terrorized Chris by angrily pointing at him from the closet, but it turns out he was just too shy to start a conversation. All that time, he wasn't evil at all, just socially awkward and misunderstood. But before this revelation, the poor monkey was beaten up by Brian's son Dylan. Being attacked by someone when you're already struggling with social anxiety and communication issues must have been incredibly traumatic. The monkey was already isolated and afraid, and the violence only made things worse. Glenn Quagmire's entire identity revolves around his sexual prowess and his most prized anatomical feature. So when a shark bit off his manhood during a skiing trip, it represented the ultimate nightmare for someone whose whole personality is built around sexual conquest. Watching Quagmire become a shell of himself, miserable and lost without the one thing that defined him, was both comedic and genuinely sad. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to something that could be taken away in an instant, showing how fragile our identities really are. The solution, getting Ida's old equipment with a huge mole on it, was both generous and awkward. Having to explain to potential partners that you're using your father's former anatomy would be enough to give anyone performance anxiety for life. The greased-up deaf guy remained a mystery for years, slipping away from every attempt to catch him while spouting his signature catchphrase. But his origin story revealed a tragic accident that changed him from an ordinary businessman into the greasy enigma we know today. Getting caught in a grease truck explosion severe enough to cause deafness and require constant lubrication to survive sounds absolutely horrifying. Imagine going from a normal life to being a permanently slippery outcast who can't hear and can barely communicate with others. The transformation from respected professional to neighborhood oddity represents a complete loss of identity and social connection. He went from being someone people respected to someone they actively tried to avoid or capture. Herbert's backstory adds a dark historical element to his character. As a World War II pilot who was shot down and sent to a concentration camp, he experienced some of humanity's darkest hours. Being forced to do degrading work like sorting recyclables while imprisoned shows how war can strip away dignity and humanity. The fact that he describes the sticky trash as the worst part, while clearly downplaying much more serious trauma, suggests a coping mechanism of focusing on minor irritations to avoid confronting deeper pain. His current inappropriate behavior toward Chris might stem from the psychological damage of his wartime experiences. Ida's journey represents the struggle of living authentically while facing rejection from those you love most. When she came out as transgender to her son Quagmire, instead of receiving support, she was shunned and rejected. Being abandoned by your own child for being true to yourself is one of the cruelest forms of emotional pain. Even after Quagmire eventually accepted her, he later forced her to choose between him and her relationship with Brian. Making someone pick between their child and their chance at happiness is pure selfishness, especially after she had already made the generous gesture of giving him her former anatomy. Joe Swanson's transformation from paraplegic to quadriplegic during a bull run represents every disabled person's worst fear, losing even more independence and control over their life. Being paralyzed from the neck down instead of just the waist changed everything for him. The abandonment that followed was even worse than the physical trauma. His wife Bonnie immediately left him for Europe, claiming she didn't sign up for this level of care. His friends tried to help, but eventually dumped him in a terrible state facility when it became too much work. Being betrayed by both your spouse and your closest friends when you need them most is a special kind of hell. Joe eventually regained some function, but the emotional scars of abandonment would last forever. Jerome carries the heaviest emotional burden of any character on the show. Losing his wife to cancer just 1 week after their wedding, followed by his daughter's death from pneumonia 6 weeks later, represents a level of tragedy that transcends comedy. Even in a cartoon universe where death and destruction happen regularly, Jerome's story stands out as genuinely heartbreaking. The timing of these losses, coming right after what should have been the happiest moments of his life, makes the tragedy even more poignant. Jillian's happiness was shattered when Diane Simmons murdered her husband Derek during her killing spree. After being jerked around by Brian and finally finding a good man to marry, having that torn away by random violence must have been devastating. The look of absolute devastation on her face when she realized her husband was dead spoke volumes about the depth of her loss. Going from newlywed bliss to widow in a matter of moments represents the kind of trauma that changes someone forever. The Kool-Aid Man, despite being a corporate mascot, became a victim of Stewie's evil twin in one of the show's more surreal moments. Having your glass body smashed and your contents consumed by a psychotic baby represents a uniquely cartoonish form of murder. The fact that he returned later suggests some form of immortality, but the experience of being destroyed and consumed must have been traumatic even for a sentient beverage container. Lois Griffin has endured tremendous physical and emotional trauma over the years. While getting killed by Stewie in a simulation doesn't count as real, her other experiences are genuinely horrific. Getting boiling oil thrown on her by Peter left her with severe burns covering her entire body, but arguably worse was the mental trauma of watching Peter perform oral acts on her sick mother due to a hypnotherapy mishap. Physical burns heal, but that mental image would haunt her forever. The violation of boundaries and the grotesque nature of the incident make it worse than any physical injury. Loretta Brown's death was both tragic and disturbing. Falling to her death when Peter destroyed her house was bad enough, but Quagmire's necrophilic intentions afterward added another layer of horror to her fate. Being killed by your ex-husband's friend's stupidity and then having your corpse violated represents a complete denial of dignity, even in death. The fact that this was played for laughs makes it even more disturbing. Meg Griffin has endured so much abuse that choosing just one worst moment seems impossible. She's been shot, stabbed, humiliated, and ignored by her family for years. But losing her arms and legs while becoming deaf, dumb, and blind represents the ultimate disability nightmare. Being completely helpless and unable to communicate or care for yourself while still being conscious and aware. would be torture beyond imagination. The combination of physical disability and sensory deprivation creates a prison worse than any jail cell. Mort Goldman's loss of his wife Muriel was made even more tragic by his inability to think of anything positive to say about their marriage. After decades together, being unable to recall a single happy memory suggests a relationship built on obligation rather than love. The fact that she died violently during Diane's killing spree adds sudden trauma to what might have otherwise been a natural parting. Having your spouse murdered while you're realizing your marriage was empty creates a complex grief that would be hard to process. Neil Goldman's humiliation when Meg kissed him during a crisis was compounded by his own poor judgment in broadcasting the moment publicly. Instead of treasuring a private moment, he turned it into a public spectacle that embarrassed them both. His subsequent suicide attempt showed how deeply the rejection affected him, but his actions had already ruined any chance he might have had with Meg. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are consequences of our own poor choices. Peter Griffin has caused enormous destruction throughout the series, but he's also been on the receiving end of significant trauma. Learning that his father figure wasn't his biological father created an identity crisis that shook his understanding of who he was. The existential pain of questioning your entire life story and family history cuts deeper than any physical injury. Peter's struggle to understand his place in the world after this revelation showed a vulnerability that's rare for his character. Seamus represents the ultimate survivor, having lost most of his body parts to various predators over the years. Whether it was James Woods, sharks, or other creatures, the systematic loss of limbs and organs while somehow remaining alive and conscious is a nightmare beyond comprehension. The fact that his origin story keeps changing suggests that the trauma was so severe he can't even remember it clearly. Living as mostly wood and prosthetics while maintaining consciousness would be a constant reminder of everything he's lost. Stewie Griffin has endured incredible trauma for a 1-year-old baby. From dingo attacks to being fused with his teddy bear, his young life has been filled with horror. But the worst incident was when he split his head open falling downstairs, and his family refused to get him medical attention. Instead of rushing him to the hospital, they tried to cover up the injury and hide the evidence. Watching a raccoon gnaw on his exposed brain, while his family worried more about getting in trouble than his health, shows a level of neglect that borders on criminal. The fact that he spent months in a coma while they continued to prioritize their own convenience over his life demonstrates how little they truly care about him despite their occasional shows of affection. Tom Tucker's identity crisis when he faced replacement by a younger anchor led to a complete career meltdown. Following Peter's advice to get tattoos live on air was the final nail in his professional coffin, destroying everything he'd worked for his entire life. Being fired from the job that defined him and then nearly committing suicide over the loss shows how completely his sense of self was tied to his career. The humiliation of having his replacement want to interview him before his suicide attempt added insult to injury. Trisha Takanawa's fate during the Y2K apocalypse episode, becoming a victim of cannibalism, represents the ultimate objectification. Being reduced to literal food for other people strips away every aspect of humanity and dignity. Even in a post-apocalyptic setting, the casual way her consumption was discussed shows how completely society had broken down and how little value was placed on individual human life. Each of these characters has faced their own unique form of suffering, from physical trauma to emotional devastation to existential crisis. What makes these moments particularly impactful is how they contrast with the show's usual comedic tone. When Family Guy decides to get dark, it doesn't hold back. These aren't just random gags or throwaway jokes. They're genuine character moments that reveal the psychological depth hiding beneath the surface humor. The fact that these characters continue to function and interact normally after experiencing such trauma speaks to both human resilience and the show's commitment to treating serious subjects with the same casual attitude as everything else. Understanding these worst moments helps us appreciate the full scope of what these characters have endured. It's easy to laugh at their misfortunes when they're presented as comedy, but examining them seriously reveals a tapestry of human suffering that would challenge anyone's sanity. The genius of Family Guy lies in its ability to make us laugh at things that would horrify us in real life. By presenting extreme trauma in a comedic context, the show allows us to process difficult emotions and experiences in a safe environment. These characters serve as vessels for our own fears and anxieties, experiencing the worst possible outcomes so we don't have to. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering provides a strange form of comfort and inspiration. Whether it's betrayal by loved ones, physical mutilation, loss of identity, or complete abandonment, every character has faced their ultimate nightmare and somehow survived to appear in the next episode. The cyclical nature of their suffering, where trauma is quickly forgotten and life returns to normal, reflects how we often deal with our own pain by compartmentalizing and moving forward rather than dwelling on past hurts. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can take comfort in knowing that no matter how bad your day was, at least you're not a Family Guy character. At least you don't have to worry about your house being destroyed by a giant chicken, your spouse cheating with your neighbor, or your family refusing to take you to the hospital when your brain is exposed. Sweet dreams, and remember that in the morning, you'll wake up in a world that's probably a little less chaotic than Quahog, Rhode Island. Though given the state of things these days, that might not be as comforting as it used to be. But hey, that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, just let the absurd suffering of animated characters lull you into peaceful slumber, secure in the knowledge that your problems are probably more manageable than theirs. Sleep tight, and don't let the evil monkeys point at you from the closet. Have you ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the twisted, chaotic universe of Family Guy, while your brain is winding down for sleep? Tonight, we're going on a journey through the most bizarre, darkest, and surprisingly complex lore hidden beneath the surface of Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. From alternate realities to character deaths that actually matter, from time travel paradoxes to the secret history of Quahog itself, this is going to be the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths you've ever experienced. But before we begin our descent into this animated rabbit hole, let me warn you. What you're about to discover might change how you see those seemingly random cutaway gags forever. Because underneath all that crude humor and pop culture references lies a narrative so intricate and dark that it makes other animated series look like children's picture books. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover the secret lore of Family Guy that most viewers never notice. Our story begins not with the Griffins we know today, but with a question that haunts every longtime viewer. How many times has this family actually died? The answer is more disturbing than you might think. Throughout the series, we've witnessed multiple universe resets, character resurrections, and timeline manipulations that suggest something far more sinister is happening in Quahog than meets the eye. Let's start with Brian Griffin, whose death in Season 12 wasn't just a ratings stunt. It revealed something crucial about the Family Guy universe. When Brian was killed by a car, the emotional weight of his death felt different from the usual cartoon violence we're accustomed to. But here's where it gets interesting. His replacement, Vinny, wasn't just a random character. He represented a glimpse into what the show could become without its moral compass, its voice of reason in a house full of chaos. The fact that Stewie was able to travel back in time to save Brian tells us something profound about the nature of time itself in this universe. Time travel isn't just a plot device in Family Guy. It's a fundamental force that shapes reality. Stewie's time machine isn't just some random invention. It's connected to a larger cosmic framework that governs how this universe operates. Consider this. Every time we see Stewie travel through time, reality doesn't just change, it fractures. We're shown multiple timelines existing simultaneously, each one revealing different aspects of the Griffin family's true nature. In some timelines, Peter never met Lois. In others, Meg is the favorite child. These aren't just alternate realities for comedy, they're glimpses into the infinite possibilities that exist when time itself becomes malleable. But time travel is just the beginning of Family Guy's cosmic horror. Let's talk about the multiverse theory that runs through the entire series, The show has explicitly confirmed that multiple universes exist, each with their own version of the Griffin family. We've seen evil versions, dog versions, even versions where the family members have completely different personalities and life paths. This multiverse concept becomes even more disturbing when you realize that some episodes might not be taking place in the same universe we started with. That feeling you get when character personalities seem inconsistent or when major events are forgotten. It might not be lazy writing. It might be because we're actually watching a different universe entirely. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie represent something deeper than just extended fight sequences. They're battles between order and chaos, between different philosophical approaches to existence. Ernie represents structure, routine, and the mundane aspects of daily life. Peter represents pure unrestrained desire, and the rejection of social norms. Their fights aren't just physical confrontations, they're metaphysical battles for the soul of their shared reality. Each chicken fight escalates in scope and destruction, suggesting that these conflicts are affecting the fundamental fabric of their universe. The level of destruction they cause should realistically end civilization as we know it, yet everything returns to normal afterwards. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence of reality itself being reset after each confrontation, maintaining the status quo through cosmic intervention. Now let's examine the true nature of Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire Family Guy universe. On the surface, he's a baby with advanced intelligence and homicidal tendencies. But dig deeper, and you'll find layers of psychological complexity that rival the greatest literary characters. Stewie's relationship with his sexuality isn't just character development. It represents the internal struggle between his intellectual advancement and his emotional immaturity. His confusion about his own identity reflects the broader theme of identity crisis that runs through the entire series. Every Griffin family member struggles with who they really are versus who they think they should be. His scientific inventions aren't just plot devices. They represent humanity's desire to control and manipulate reality itself. Stewie's time machine, his weather control device, his mind control technology, they're all attempts to impose order on a chaotic universe. But every time he uses these inventions, reality becomes more unstable, not less. The most disturbing aspect of Stewie's character is his relationship with Brian. Their friendship represents the only genuine emotional connection in the Griffin household, but it's also the most psychologically complex relationship in the series. Brian serves as both father figure and intellectual, equal to Stewie, creating a dynamic that's simultaneously heartwarming and deeply troubling. Let's shift our focus to Meg Griffin, the most tragic character in the Family Guy universe. Her treatment by her family isn't just running gag. It's a systematic psychological experiment in how prolonged emotional abuse shapes personality development. Meg represents the scapegoat, the family member who absorbs all the dysfunction and toxicity so that the others can maintain their illusion of normalcy. But here's what most viewers miss. Meg isn't actually the weakest member of the Griffin family. She's the strongest. She endures constant psychological torture and emerges with her sanity relatively intact. In episodes where she finally snaps and fights back, we see glimpses of her true potential. She's not the victim, she's the survivor. The episodes where Meg temporarily gains popularity or success reveal something crucial about the Griffin family dynamic. They literally cannot function without having someone to blame and abuse. When Meg rises above her assigned role, the entire family structure begins to collapse. This suggests that their dysfunction isn't accidental. It's carefully maintained through deliberate psychological manipulation. Chris Griffin represents wasted potential and the tragedy of inherited dysfunction. His artistic abilities and occasional flashes of intelligence show us what he could become in a healthier environment. But he's trapped in a cycle of learned helplessness, modeled after his father's behavior patterns. Chris is what happens when natural talent is systematically crushed by family dysfunction. His relationship with his imaginary friend and his artistic pursuits aren't just character quirks. They're survival mechanisms. ways of maintaining some connection to his authentic self while navigating a family that demands conformity to their twisted value system. Peter Griffin himself is perhaps the most disturbing character when you really analyze his behavior patterns. He isn't just immature or irresponsible. He displays clear signs of multiple personality disorders, sociopathic tendencies, and complete lack of empathy for others. His actions regularly destroy lives, yet he never faces meaningful consequences. This isn't cartoon logic. This is evidence that Peter exists outside normal social and legal frameworks. He's protected by something larger than himself, some cosmic force that ensures his continued existence regardless of the chaos he creates. Peter Griffin isn't just a bad father and husband. He's an agent of chaos, a force of nature that exists to disrupt order and stability. His job history reveals something interesting about the economic reality of the Family Guy universe. He's worked for toy companies, television networks, and various other industries, often rising to positions of significant power despite his obvious incompetence. This suggests that the economic system itself is fundamentally broken, rewarding chaos and incompetence over skill and dedication. Lois Griffin's psychology is perhaps the most complex of all: the family members. She comes from wealth and privilege but chose to marry into dysfunction. This wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a deliberate choice that reveals something dark about her character. Lois is addicted to drama and chaos. She could leave Peter at any time, but she stays because the dysfunction feeds something deep within her psyche. Her moments of extreme violence and rage aren't just comedy beats. They're glimpses into her true nature, carefully hidden beneath a facade of suburban respectability. Lois Schmidt Griffin is potentially the most dangerous member of the family because she understands manipulation and control in ways the others don't. Her relationship with her wealthy family reveals the broader class dynamics at play in the Family Guy universe. The Schmidts represent old money, established power structures, and systematic oppression disguised as respectability. Lois chose to reject that world, but she brought its values and methods into her marriage, creating a toxic hybrid of working-class dysfunction and upper-class manipulation. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this story, and its history reveals disturbing truths about American society. Founded on violence and maintained through systematic corruption, Quahog represents every small American town that's slowly dying while pretending everything is fine. The local government is openly corrupt, the police force is incompetent, and the social structures are designed to maintain inequality and dysfunction. Mayor West's obvious mental illness and continued political power isn't just absurd humor. It's commentary on how democratic systems can be manipulated by charismatic figures who appeal to voters' worst impulses. His policies are destructive and nonsensical. Yet he remains popular because he validates the community's desire to avoid responsibility for their own problems. The recurring characters in Quahog each represent different aspects of American social dysfunction. Cleveland represents the loyal friend who enables destructive behavior rather than confronting it. Joe represents the warrior mentality that struggles to adapt to civilian life. Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual predation disguised as humor. But it's the relationship between these characters that reveals the true horror of the Family Guy universe. They're all trapped in cycles of mutual enablement, each one preventing the others from growing or changing. Their friendships aren't based on genuine affection or shared values. They're based on mutual need for validation of their worst impulses. The show's treatment of religion reveals another layer of its complex worldview. Religion in Family Guy isn't just mocked or dismissed. It's shown to be another system of control and manipulation, used by both believers and non-believers to justify their behavior and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. The various religious figures who appear throughout the series are almost universally corrupt, hypocritical, or mentally unstable. This isn't anti-religious sentiment. It's commentary on how spiritual concepts can be twisted to serve earthly power structures. The show suggests that genuine spirituality might exist, but it's constantly corrupted by human weakness and desire for control over others. Death himself appears as a recurring character, and his portrayal reveals something profound about the show's philosophy regarding mortality and meaning. Death isn't portrayed as evil or frightening. He's shown as tired, overworked, and occasionally compassionate. This suggests that mortality isn't the enemy in the Family Guy universe. Meaninglessness is the real enemy. The various celebrity encounters throughout the series serve a specific narrative function beyond simple humor. They represent the collision between fantasy and reality, between the Griffin family's delusional self-image and the actual impact they have on the world. Most celebrities in Family Guy are either destroyed by their encounter with the Griffins or reveal themselves to be just as dysfunctional and hollow. This pattern suggests that fame and success in their universe don't actually solve fundamental human problems. The celebrities are just as trapped in cycles of self-destruction and meaninglessness as the regular characters. Success becomes another form of prison, another way to avoid confronting deeper truths about existence and purpose. The show's handling of social and political issues reveals a deeply cynical worldview disguised as mindless entertainment. Every political position is shown to be equally corrupt and self-serving. Every social movement is revealed to have ulterior motives. Every attempt at progress is ultimately futile because human nature itself is fundamentally flawed. But here's where it gets interesting. This cynicism isn't presented as the final word. It's presented as the starting point for authentic human connection. Only after accepting the futility of external solutions do the characters occasionally find moments of genuine love, friendship, and meaning. These moments are rare and usually brief, but they represent the show's true message about what makes life worth living. The darker episodes of Family Guy, the ones that deal with serious topics like domestic violence, addiction, and mental illness, aren't just tonal experiments. They're glimpses into the reality that exists beneath the cartoon violence and crude humor. These episodes suggest that everything we've been laughing at is actually a coping mechanism, a way of dealing with trauma and pain that's too intense to face directly. Stewie and Brian's road trip episodes reveal this most clearly. When these two characters are alone together, away from the family dysfunction, their conversations become deeper and more meaningful. They discuss philosophy, mortality, and the nature of existence itself. These aren't just character development moments. They're the show's way of exploring serious themes without the distraction of constant humor. The time travel episodes create a complex mythology around cause and effect, free will, and determinism. When Stewie changes the past, the consequences ripple through reality in ways that suggest everything is connected to everything else. Small changes create massive alterations in the timeline, implying that individual choices have far more impact than we typically realize. But here's the disturbing part. Despite all the timeline changes and alternate realities, certain core patterns remain constant. The Griffin family dysfunction persists across multiple universes and timelines. This suggests that some aspects of human nature are so fundamental that they transcend individual choice and circumstance. The episodes that focus on Brian's writing career reveal the show's commentary on creative expression and artistic integrity. Brian's struggle to balance commercial success with authentic expression mirrors the show's own position in the entertainment landscape. Family Guy itself exists in the tension between meaningful content and commercial viability, between artistic expression and market demands. His relationship with other writers and artists in the series shows how creative communities can become toxic environments where competition and ego destroy the collaborative spirit that should drive artistic endeavors. The literary world in Family Guy is portrayed as pretentious, shallow, and ultimately meaningless. Yet Brian continues to pursue it because the alternative is accepting that his life has no greater purpose. The show's portrayal of education and intellectual development is particularly dark. Smart characters like Brian and Stewie are often shown to be more miserable than their less intelligent family members. Knowledge and awareness don't lead to happiness or fulfillment. They lead to greater understanding of how meaningless and chaotic existence really is. This anti-intellectual streak isn't promoting ignorance as bliss. It's questioning whether intelligence and education, as they currently exist in our society, actually serve human flourishing or just create new forms of suffering and alienation. The show suggests that wisdom might be different from intelligence, and that genuine understanding might require accepting mystery and uncertainty rather than seeking complete knowledge and control. The musical episodes and cutaway gags serve a specific psychological function beyond simple entertainment. They provide brief escapes from the relentless dysfunction of the main narrative. These moments of pure creativity and joy remind us what human beings are capable of when they're not trapped in cycles of self-destruction and mutual harm. But even these moments are tinged with sadness because they highlight how rare genuine happiness and creativity are in the Griffin family's daily life. The contrast makes their normal dysfunction seem even more tragic and unnecessary. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, what emerges is a picture of a universe that's simultaneously hopeless and hopeful, meaningless and profound. The show presents human nature as fundamentally flawed and destructive, yet it also shows us moments of genuine love, creativity, and connection that make existence worthwhile despite its inherent tragedy. The Griffin family represents all of us at our worst and occasionally at our best. Their dysfunction is our dysfunction, magnified and exaggerated for comedic effect, but rooted in recognizable human weaknesses and fears. Their rare moments of genuine connection remind us that love and meaning are possible, even in the midst of chaos and pain. The true lore of Family Guy isn't hidden in elaborate conspiracy theories or complex mythologies. It's hidden in plain sight, in the psychological patterns and relationship dynamics that drive every episode. It's a show about damaged people trying to connect with each other and failing most of the time, but occasionally succeeding in ways that make all the failure worthwhile. And maybe that's the most profound truth of all. That meaning doesn't come from avoiding dysfunction and chaos, but from finding ways to love and connect despite the inevitable presence of dysfunction and chaos in all human relationships. The Griffins aren't aspirational characters. They're cautionary tales and sources of recognition, mirrors that reflect our own struggles with identity, purpose, and connection. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching crude humor and pop culture references. You're watching one of the most complex examinations of human nature ever created, disguised as mindless entertainment, but actually offering profound insights into what it means to be human in a universe that often seems indifferent to our suffering and our joy. Sweet dreams, and may your own family dysfunction be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins, but no less full of unexpected moments of love and meaning that make it all worthwhile. The lore of Family Guy is ultimately the lore of being human, and that's a story that never really ends. It just keeps evolving with each new episode of our own lives. Did you know that Family Guy has been secretly building one of the most complex fictional universes on television for over 2 decades? And tonight we're diving deep into every hidden connection, conspiracy theory, and mind-bending detail that will either put you to sleep or keep you awake all night thinking about how Brian Griffin might actually be the smartest character in animated television history. Welcome to the most comprehensive exploration of Family Guy lore ever assembled, where we'll uncover the hidden patterns that connect seemingly random episodes across 20-plus seasons, reveal the dark psychological underpinnings of Peter Griffin's behavior, and examine why this seemingly simple animated sitcom contains more philosophical depth than most people realize. Let's start with something that seems innocent on the surface but becomes deeply unsettling when you really think about it. The fact that Stewie Griffin, a 1-year-old baby, possesses technology that surpasses anything available in our current reality. His time machine alone represents engineering capabilities that would revolutionize human civilization. Yet nobody in his family seems to notice or care that their infant has created devices that violate the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. The implications of Stewie's inventions extend far beyond simple comedy. When you consider that he's built ray guns, mind control devices, teleportation equipment, and vehicles capable of interdimensional travel, all while maintaining the physical and cognitive limitations of a toddler. This suggests either that the Griffin family exists in a universe where the laws of science operate completely differently, or that Stewie himself represents something far more extraordinary than a precocious child. Think about the episodes where Stewie travels through time and encounters multiple versions of himself from different timelines. Each iteration of Stewie possesses the same impossible technological capabilities, which implies that his genius transcends individual timeline variations. This consistency across dimensional boundaries suggests that Stewie's intelligence might be a fundamental constant in the Family Guy multiverse, rather than a random genetic anomaly. But here's where things get really interesting when we examine the relationship between Stewie's technological capabilities and Brian's intellectual development throughout the series. Brian Griffin starts as a relatively normal talking dog who enjoys literature and maintains liberal political views. However, as the seasons progress, his personality becomes increasingly complex, cynical, and philosophically sophisticated, almost as if he's being influenced by prolonged exposure to Stewie's advanced technology and interdimensional adventures. The evolution of Brian's character raises questions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence in the Family Guy universe. If a dog can develop human-level cognitive abilities and engage in complex, philosophical discussions, then what does this say about the fundamental nature of reality in Quahog? The fact that Brian's intelligence continues expanding throughout the series while other characters remain relatively static suggests that something unique is happening to him. Specifically, consider the episodes where Brian dies and is replaced by Vinny, the replacement dog, who, despite being the same species, lacks Brian's intellectual capabilities. This proves that Brian's intelligence isn't simply a species-wide trait, but something specifically tied to his individual consciousness. The temporary replacement storyline also demonstrates how integral Brian has become to the family dynamic, not just as a pet, but as a legitimate family member whose absence creates genuine emotional trauma. The relationship between Brian and Stewie represents one of the most complex friendships in animated television, spanning adventures through time, space, and alternate dimensions. Their bond transcends typical pet-owner relationships and approaches something resembling true intellectual partnership. This dynamic becomes even more fascinating when you consider that their adventures often involve visiting timelines where their relationship takes different forms, sometimes as friends, sometimes as enemies, and occasionally as something approaching equals moving deeper into Family Guy lore. We encounter the recurring theme of Peter Griffin's seemingly limitless capacity for causing destruction, while somehow avoiding serious consequences. Peter has crashed vehicles through buildings, started international incidents, caused environmental disasters, and engaged in behavior that would realistically result in imprisonment or death. Yet he continues living his suburban lifestyle with minimal repercussions for his actions. This pattern suggests that Peter might exist within some kind of protective narrative bubble, where conventional rules of cause and effect don't apply in the same way they would for normal people. The consistency of his survival across increasingly dangerous situations implies either supernatural intervention or existence within a simulated reality where certain characters are programmed to be essentially indestructible. The Griffin family's relationship with death itself provides another layer of complexity to the series' lore. Multiple characters have died and been resurrected, Brian's temporary death being the most notable example, but there are numerous instances where characters should have died, but somehow survived catastrophic events. This casual relationship with mortality suggests that the Family Guy universe operates under different existential rules than our reality. Quahog itself emerges as a character in the series when you examine how the town responds to the Griffin family's constant chaos. Despite Peter's regular destruction of property and public safety, the community continues functioning normally as if nothing happened. This resilience suggests either that Quahog exists outside normal space-time, or that the town itself possesses some kind of regenerative properties that allow it to recover from damage. The recurring characters in Family Guy form an intricate web of relationships that span decades of episodes, each bringing their own psychological complexities to the narrative. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the series creates interesting questions about character continuity and the nature of friendship in long-running animated series. His experiences in his own spin-off show technically exist within the same universe, but rarely get referenced in Family Guy proper, creating a kind of parallel narrative space. Glenn Quagmire represents perhaps the most problematic character in terms of Family Guy lore, because his behavior often crosses lines that would be completely unacceptable in real life. Yet he's treated as a quirky neighbor rather than a legitimate threat. This treatment reveals something disturbing about the moral framework of the Family Guy universe, where certain types of harmful behavior are normalized through repetition and comedic presentation. The Chicken Man fights between Peter and Ernie. The giant chicken deserves special attention because they represent some of the most elaborately choreographed sequences in the entire series. These battles often span multiple locations, involve massive collateral damage, and demonstrate fighting capabilities that far exceed what either character should possess based on their apparent physical attributes. The chicken fights serve as almost mythological episodes within the series where normal rules are completely suspended. When examining these extended fight sequences, you notice they follow patterns similar to classic mythology, where heroes and monsters engage in battles that reshape the landscape around them. The destruction caused during these fights would realistically devastate Quahog's infrastructure and economy. Yet everything returns to normal by the next episode, as if these epic confrontations exist in a separate reality layer. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for create their own complex narrative space where characters interact with historical figures, fictional characters, and alternate versions of themselves. These brief sequences often contain more concentrated storytelling than entire episodes of other shows, and they've created a vast library of micro-narratives that exist alongside the main Family Guy timeline. Some cutaway gags reference each other across seasons, creating a meta-narrative about the nature of memory and storytelling within the Family Guy universe. The fact that characters sometimes remember events from cutaway gags in later episodes suggests that these sequences aren't just comedic diversions, but actual experiences that exist within the characters' shared reality. The show's treatment of religion and spirituality adds another layer to its lore, with multiple episodes exploring different afterlife concepts. Divine intervention scenarios and questions about the nature of good and evil. Death appears as a recurring character who seems genuinely concerned about maintaining cosmic balance, which implies that the Family Guy universe operates under specific metaphysical rules. Episodes featuring death reveal that the afterlife in Family Guy functions more like a bureaucracy than a spiritual realm with specific procedures for soul collection and processing. This bureaucratic approach to mortality suggests that existence in the Family Guy universe might be more regulated and systematic than it initially appears, despite the surface-level chaos. The time travel episodes create fascinating paradoxes and timeline complications that the show sometimes acknowledges and sometimes completely ignores. This inconsistent approach to temporal mechanics suggests that time itself might function differently in the Family Guy universe, perhaps operating more like a narrative device than a fixed physical law. Stewie's time travel adventures often involve meeting historical figures who react to him as if talking babies are perfectly normal. This consistency across different time periods implies that the unusual characteristics of Family Guy characters might be universal constants that exist across all timelines rather than modern anomalies. The show's relationship with celebrity culture creates interesting questions about the nature of reality within its universe. Real celebrities often appear as themselves, but they interact with the fictional Griffin family as if they're legitimate public figures. This blending of real and fictional personalities suggests that the Family Guy universe might exist parallel to our own reality rather than completely separate from it. When celebrities appear in Family Guy, they often display exaggerated versions of their public personas, which raises questions about whether these are the actual celebrities or fictional representations based on public perception. The show's treatment of celebrity interactions reveals something interesting about how fictional universes can comment on and interact with real-world culture. The evolution of animation quality throughout Family Guy's run creates its own meta-narrative about the nature of visual reality within the show. Early episodes feature simpler animation styles, while later seasons display increasingly sophisticated visual effects. This progression mirrors technological advancement in our reality, but within the show it might represent something deeper about the nature of visual perception in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that specifically reference the show's animation style or production history create fascinating recursive loops where characters become aware of their fictional nature without fully breaking the fourth wall. These moments suggest that the characters might exist on multiple levels of reality simultaneously, both as fictional constructs and as conscious beings within their own universe. The Griffin. Family's economic situation provides another layer of complexity because Peter's job history and income level should realistically make their lifestyle impossible. Yet they maintain a suburban home, support multiple vehicles, and finance Stewie's expensive scientific experiments. This economic impossibility suggests that traditional rules of finance and resource management don't apply in the Family Guy universe. Episodes that focus on the family's financial struggles reveal that they do face economic consequences, but these problems get resolved through increasingly absurd means that wouldn't work in real life. This pattern implies that the Griffin family exists within a narrative framework where problems require narrative solutions rather than realistic ones. The show's treatment of education and intelligence creates interesting patterns when you examine how different characters learn and grow. Brian's intellectual development contrasts sharply with Peter's consistent ignorance, despite both characters having access to similar information and experiences. This disparity suggests that intelligence in the Family Guy universe might be more fixed and character-specific than it is in reality. Stewie's advanced knowledge, despite his infant status, raises questions about how learning and development work in this fictional universe. His vocabulary and technical expertise far exceed what any child could realistically possess. Yet other baby characters in the show display normal infant behavior. This inconsistency implies that Stewie's intelligence might be supernatural rather than developmental. The recurring theme of alternate dimensions and parallel universes in Family Guy creates a complex multiverse structure where different versions of familiar characters exist with varying personality traits and life circumstances. These alternate reality episodes suggest that the main Family Guy timeline is just one possible configuration among infinite variations. When characters travel between dimensions, they often encounter versions of themselves that made different life choices or develop different personality traits. This concept implies that character identity in the Family Guy universe might be more fluid and circumstantial than it initially appears. The multiverse episodes also raise questions about free will and determinism within the show's cosmology. The show's approach to historical events creates fascinating anachronisms and alternative history scenarios that suggest the Family Guy universe might exist in a timeline that diverges from our own reality in subtle but important ways. Episodes set in historical periods often include modern elements that shouldn't exist, which implies either time travel influence or an alternate historical development. Family Guy's treatment of technology. Advancement shows interesting patterns where some innovations appear decades ahead of schedule, while others lag behind realistic development timelines. This inconsistent technological progression suggests that innovation in the Family Guy universe might be driven by different factors than in our reality. The psychological depth of individual characters becomes more apparent when you examine their behavior patterns across multiple seasons. Peter's childlike wonder and destructive impulses suggest possible developmental disorders or psychological trauma that the show explores through comedy rather than serious analysis. This approach reveals character complexity while maintaining entertainment value. Brian's intellectual pretensions and emotional vulnerabilities create a character study about the relationship between intelligence and happiness. His struggles with depression, alcoholism, and unfulfilled artistic ambitions represent serious psychological themes disguised as animated comedy. This layered characterization demonstrates how Family Guy uses humor to explore deeper human experiences. Lois Griffin's role as the family anchor reveals interesting dynamics about gender roles and family stability in dysfunctional households. Her ability to maintain sanity while managing Peter's chaos, Stewie's schemes, and the general dysfunction suggests either extraordinary psychological resilience or possible supernatural intervention. The supporting characters in Family Guy each contribute to a larger tapestry of human behavior and social commentary. Joe Swanson's disability and heroic personality create discussions about capability and determination, while Mayor West's bizarre behavior comments on political leadership and civic responsibility. As we reach the end of this exploration into Family Guy lore, it becomes clear that what appears to be a simple animated sitcom actually contains layers of philosophical complexity, psychological depth, and narrative sophistication that reward careful analysis. The show's ability to maintain comedic entertainment while exploring serious themes demonstrates the power of animation as a storytelling medium. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying awake, thinking about these connections, Family Guy continues evolving and adding new layers to its already complex mythology. Each episode contributes to a larger narrative about family dysfunction, American culture, and the absurd nature of modern existence, wrapped in accessible animated comedy that somehow makes profound observations about the human condition feel effortlessly entertaining and surprisingly profound.